Up on Network Africa. South Sudan Vice President Riek Machar tests positive for coronavirus. South Africa BCG booster trials seek low-cost weapon against COVID-19. Plus, Lesotho Prime Minister Thomas Tabane leaves office amid a murder case. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. There are now 88,580 confirmed cases across Africa. Out of that figure, over 34,091 people have recovered. The confirmed death toll on the continent stands at 2,840. South Africa is still the worst hit country in the continent, with about 16,433 confirmed cases. It's followed by Egypt with 12,764, then Algeria with 7,201 cases, and Morocco with 6,972. In West Africa, Nigeria has recorded 6,175 cases, followed by Ghana, which has seen 5,918. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are Egypt with 645, Algeria 555, and South Africa 286. With the coronavirus now in every country in Africa, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa says the continent is seeing results in containing the spread of the virus. However, Dr. Mashidiso Moeti, who was speaking during the World Health Assembly 2020, says the continent cannot lose sight of other priorities, such as the wild polio virus and HIV/AIDS.
We are seeing results. Namibia and the Seychelles have not reported any new cases for over a month. Côte d'Ivoire has reduced the spread of cases to the periphery by building on existing primary healthcare interventions. South Africa and Mauritania have mobilized thousands of community health workers. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, health educators are sharing information on Ebola and COVID-19. Zambia and Zimbabwe are using real-time polio surveillance to track the spread of cases. As we fight this pandemic, we cannot lose sight of other priorities. The African region is on the verge of certifying the eradication of wild polio virus. This is a major public health milestone in Africa, and lessons and tools from this experience are helping direct the COVID-19 response in countries. Modeling studies by WHO and partners show that deaths from HIV/AIDS and malaria could dramatically increase if essential services are disrupted. Countries are reporting stockouts of vaccines, and immunization campaigns have been postponed. These complex challenges call for regional and global solidarity, innovation, and equitable approaches to protect the most vulnerable among us. We count on this to succeed in making health a reality for all people in Africa.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized the World Health Organization for not responding strongly to reports of racism and discrimination against Africans living in southern China's city of Guangzhou in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. President Trump has called the WHO health body a puppet of China and had threatened to permanently freeze U.S. funding. He has also repeatedly accused China of failing in its response to the pandemic. In his letter, the WHO chief Tedros Ghebreyesus says President Trump accused the body of not commenting on China's racially discriminatory actions, despite complaints of forced quarantines, evictions, and refusal of services by African nationals. He was referring to widespread testing of foreign nationals in Guangzhou in mid-April that was marred by claims of Africans being targeted on the basis of their race. The Guangzhou authorities at the time denied the claims of racial profiling, but President Trump had said the WHO should have condemned the racially discriminatory actions. Well, South Sudan's Vice President Riek Machar has tested positive for coronavirus. He says he has no symptoms but will self-isolate for 14 days. His wife, who is Defense Minister Angelina Teny, some bodyguards and other staff have also contracted the virus. Machar was tested on May the 13th after one of the members of the government task force leading the fight against the virus tested positive. The vice president was until last week a member of the task force. So far, South Sudan has recorded 236 cases of COVID-19 and 4 deaths. Well, as scientists worldwide are scrambling for vaccine candidates, South African biotech group Task this month started the continent's first trial to see whether 250 high-risk workers given a booster dose of BCG vaccine show better protection against COVID-19 than the same number given a placebo. Officials say efforts underway could, if successful, give the continent a cheap and easily deployable weapon against the virus. Tests to see if the century-old Bacille Camet-Guerin vaccine, widely used in Africa for tuberculosis, protects against the new coronavirus have also begun in the Netherlands and Australia.
We have started a clinical trial with the very old BCG TB vaccine to see if it can perhaps protect from COVID-19 infection or more even from the severity of its symptoms. And it's right that it's most likely the first such trial in Africa. Participants in the hospital we work at, they are very happy to participate just because there is something one can do. It might not work, you know, it's a reasonable assumption that we are just going after a hunch and it might not eventually materialize, but still, one has to start doing something. And I feel that it's a good thing to do that.
Over in Zimbabwe, Rosemary Pamire struggles to feed her family well before Zimbabwe entered a lockdown in March. Now she can hardly put together a meal a day. The United Nations Food Agency says coronavirus is deepening climate and recession-induced food shortages.
Rosemary Pamire struggled to feed her family well before Zimbabwe entered lockdown in March to try to combat the new coronavirus. Now she can hardly put together a meal a day as the southern African nation faces a deepening food crisis. Sitting on a bed in her two-room lodgings in Harare's Mbare township, Pamire says she has exhausted the little food she had stocked up during the first 21 days of an extended 7-week lockdown, and money is hard to come by. Zimbabwe's finance minister has warned foreign lenders of worsening food insecurity if the country does not get financial help to fight the coronavirus.
We can only afford to eat once a day, which doesn't satisfy my family. I wish our government could give us food so that I'm able to feed my family. Life is so difficult. I don't know how we will survive.
Pamire, who lives with 4 grown children and 2 grandchildren, used to buy clothes and shoes from Zambia for resale at home and get $100 after a good trip. But the border is closed, her passport expired, and she does not have money to renew it. Pamire's 2 adult sons cannot chip in with food because the local market where they carted goods for customers for a fee has been shut for 6 weeks, just like all informal markets from where millions of Zimbabweans earn a living. The burden to fend for the family now lies with Pamire's 19-year-old daughter, Hannah, who sells ice lollies and bottled water at Mbare Fresh Vegetable Market at the risk of arrest by police because it's illegal. On a good day, Anna sells a pack of ice lollies for 110 Zimbabwe dollars. After buying new stock, only $1 is left for the family of 7 to buy food.
At times when there is no maize meal at home and our ice lolly sales are down, our mother tells us to have ice lollies and water, and we sleep hoping for a better day.
But spending hours in the scorching sun risks permanent damage for one of Anna's eyes, which was injured last year and required 9 stitches. She does not have the $25 required for eye ointment every 2 weeks. The World Food Programme says 7.7 million Zimbabweans, half the population, need food aid after a devastating drought and cyclone in 2019 and with patchy rains this year.
Tanzania's Civil Aviation Authority has lifted all restrictions on passenger flights operating in the country. The body said in a tweet that the development follows a decrease of COVID-19 cases. The Ministry of Health on Monday said arriving international travelers would be screened for COVID-19 symptoms at entry points before being granted entry into the country. Foreigners visiting Tanzania will no longer be subjected to a mandatory 14-day quarantine on arrival. The decision comes a day after President John Magufuli said he would consider reopening the country to tourists if the number of those hospitalized for coronavirus remained low for the next week. Well, away from the COVID-19 pandemic, Rwandan genocide fugitive Felicien Kabuga is to appear before a Paris court 3 days after French police swooped on his hideout in a Paris suburb, ending a 26-year manhunt. The 84-year-old is accused of funding militias that massacred around 800,000 people. He was indicted in 1997 on 7 criminal counts, including genocide, all in relation to the 1994 Rwanda genocide. At Tuesday's hearing, which is procedural, the court will set out the legal process before passing the case to investigative judges who will decide whether to hand Kabuga to a UN court handling alleged crimes against humanity. At least one France-based genocide victim support group said it was considering legal action to unearth how Kabuga was able to go underground in France and what help he had received. Rwanda's 2 main ethnic groups are the Hutus and Tutsis, who have historically had an antagonistic relationship and fought a civil war in the early 1990s. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that Sudan is required to pay punitive damages to some of the victims of the 1998 embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania carried out by Al-Qaeda. More than 200 people died and thousands were injured in the attacks. Sudan was accused of giving Al-Qaeda and its leader Osama bin Laden technical and financial support. The Supreme Court ruling applies to U.S. nationals, embassy employees, and contractors. The ruling comes at a time when Sudan's new government is pushing to be removed from the U.S.'s list of state sponsors of terrorism. Let's move to Lesotho now, where the Prime Minister Thomas Tabane has formally stepped down as Prime Minister following months of pressure after he was named as a suspect in the murder of his ex-wife. The 80-year-old's current wife, with whom he was living at the time of the murder, was charged in connection with the killing in February. The pair have denied any involvement. He said he was stepping down because of his age, adding, "I am no longer as energetic as I used to be." He made no reference to the murder case, but thanked his wife and entire family for their unwavering support to him as Prime Minister. Finance Minister Mwekti Majoro is expected to be sworn in as Mr. Tabane's replacement. You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Still ahead on the program. Burkina Faso artist pays homage to health workers treating the COVID-19 patients. That's in a moment. Welcome back to the program. Burundi will hold national elections on Wednesday, becoming the first country to run a presidential vote during the coronavirus pandemic, just days after authorities kicked out the World Health Organization. The election campaign has been the most competitive in almost 3 decades after a long civil war and then 15 years under President Pierre Nkurunziza. In office since 2005, Mr. Nkurunziza clung to power in 2015, running for a controversial third term that sparked protests and months of violence. More than 340,000 people fled the country, prompting an investigation by the International Criminal Court and leading many international donors to cease support. 7 candidates are now vying to replace the incumbent after he announced in 2018 that he would not run again. The ruling CNDD-FDD has put forward the president's head of military affairs, Evariste Ndayishimiye, who has pushed back against concerns over holding the national vote during the pandemic. At a political rally last month, he said, "Do not be afraid. God loves Burundi, and if there are people who have tested positive, it is so that God may manifest his power in Burundi." Well, joining us now to discuss the upcoming elections is Dr. Okwi Opala. He's an African Affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us in the studios.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes, sir. Well, on Wednesday, at the height of COVID-19 pandemic, Burundi is going to choose another leader. How do you see this playing out?
Well, it's an opportunity for a new beginning, but it also presents risks.
Yes.
An opportunity to break away from the authoritarian regime that have ruled Burundi for 15 years now, after 12 years civil war. But there are 2 risks. One is the risk of violence, because, well, the 2 candidates are ex-rebel leaders. Yeah. And again, both of them, especially the opposition that is not from the ruling party, is particularly popular. And both candidates have been promising their supporters that they are going to, they're assuring them of victory. So what is the likelihood of the election not satisfying both candidates is very high, which may lead to violence. And, one will not forget what happened before the Civil War that made almost 300,000 people, in which 300,000 people perished. Yeah. Then the other risk is the risk of spike in COVID-19 cases. Because during this time, campaigning has been going on, there have been mass gathering, and then both the government and the parties have ignored social distancing, and people are mingling and all that. So it also presents a risk of a huge spike in COVID-19 cases. So in as much as there are opportunities, we have to look at these 2 risks.
Indeed, and last week the government even expelled, the World Health Organization team in the country. They were accusing them of unacceptable interference. Could it be that the government is, trying to cover up the true extent of the outbreak as they are ignoring all the social distancing rules?
Well, I don't think it's more of covering up the case of, well, that may be part of it, but it may be a subsidiary reason. I think the main reason is not to have any independent person commenting on the election, speaking about the election, and things that may go wrong during this election. Mm-hmm. Remember also that the foreign journalists have been asked not to report from Burundi. Yeah. Also, even the foreign observers have been asked not to come close. And if you come, you'll be quarantined for 14 days and all that. They've been discouraged. True. So, in other words, every person that cannot be controlled by government, they want them out until they do what they want to do. And that's why, I think the whole essence is not necessarily whether they will comment, whether they have more cases or not, few cases or many cases. I think it was more of the political agenda that they want to protect what they want to do, and they don't want the wrong message to be sent out with evidence, with data.
All right, so now 7 candidates are vying for the presidential seat. President Nkurunziza is actually backing a former retired army general. Do you think this could give Evariste, the upper hand against the other 6 candidates?
Obviously, it will give him some advantage, but that advantage is not in terms of popularity. Yeah, okay. It's not in terms of popular votes, okay, but in terms of skewing the forces that will control the election in favor of the party's candidate. Because, I mean, the government of Nkurunziza have always used suppression, mass arrest of opposition, and then election fraud, and intimidation to, I mean, as a political tool. So, and I don't think it will be different now. So, and if a government that controls cohesive forces is supporting a candidate, these are the kind of things he will lend to that candidate that will give the advantage. Not necessarily that he's so popular that he will wave. In fact, a number, if it were to be election, one man, one vote, no intimidation, no influence, I think people who may not want supporting that candidate may be a liability.
All right, just finally, the country is about to lose its president of 15 years, but recently he was given the acronym, the Supreme Guide to Patriotism. That's President Nkurunziza, according to the official title. Now, that's what he will be given once he steps down, the Supreme Guide to Patriotism. What does this mean for the political future, of the country? Because regardless of who wins, President Nkurunziza is now like the supreme leader, so to speak.
Well, I think most leaders, especially African leaders, will want to keep controlling things in or out of office. They want to remain in power. But but history has taught us that it doesn't always pan out like that. In Angola, the Santos campaign, handpicked the successor. But when now, after that, even the children are being prosecuted, are being investigated and all that. So he will desire to remain in control, but he may not control all the forces after he leaves office. So that may be what he wants, that way what he will plan for himself, but how it turns out is likely going to be different.
All right, we'll just have to wait and see how all that pans out. Dr. Okwi Okpala, African Affairs Analyst, thank you for speaking to us today.
It's always my pleasure.
Thank you. Artist Ali Vetouhe has produced a cover version of a world-famous Grupe Kassav song to pay homage to the health workers treating patients infected with COVID-19 in Burkina Faso. Entitled Stallions of the Health Service, the lyrics start with, "Health workers, may God bless you," describing health workers as soldiers who risk themselves and their families to save lives. Burkina Faso has been overrun by a jihadist insurgency since 2018, which had forced about 1 million people to flee their homes, many of whom are stuck in crowded camps with few protections while this pandemic rages. At the university hospital's COVID-19 ward, Vetouhe's song has lifted the tired spirits and broken morale of some of the staff who feel stigmatized at home.
Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse. Oui, c'est ça. Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse. Oui, c'est ça. Et la maladie dans la cité.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.